Good morning, Rabotai. Good morning, Rebbetzinotai. Welcome to half of Brazil is here in the room today. Very, very happy to have all of you. It's amazing that on the day that we have all of our Brazilian friends, our own ambassador, if I would say, Sonny Dewar is not here this morning. I think he was at maybe the 6:30 minyan, so we missed the chance. He was here, sir. See, I didn't doubt him for 1 second, but he's not here. Wasn't here to welcome you. I'm sorry. Next time, our ambassador will be here to welcome you to our Beit Knesset. Good to have all of you. It's also good to have people shift from the classes online to being able to join in person. And you'll tell me afterwards if the breakfast in the class feels in person like what it seems like online. You let us know. Okay, let's get started. So I wanted to just share one thing with you before we do our sponsorships, and that is that we have a very difficult situation that I want to just to kind of dedicate in a very special way today's class to a young man from Los Angeles whose cousin Michael Haruni asked us to dedicate today in loving memory of Dr. Michael Haruni, a dentist from Los Angeles. Alav Shalom. Hashem Yimkom Damo. God should avenge his death. Ariel ben Abraham, a disgruntled Muslim customer, walked in and shot him in his place of work. This is what our world is coming to. This is what is allowed on the streets of a democracy, and they won't even call it a hate crime. So Hashem should bless us, that we should be safe, that our people should be safe, that our families should be safe, and God should send nechama to the Haruni family. Lilui nishmat Ariel ben Avraham, Hashem yinkom damo. And as well, of course, all of our Torah learning for this week is dedicated by the Torah Center Gold donors, the Ash brothers, Isaac and David Ash. Embrace Torah knowledge, learn with passion, do with purpose, give with generosity. All of the classes this week are going to be dedicated for their success and bracha for them and their families. Of course, if you'd like to join the Wall of Torah, you're more than welcome to do so. You can speak to Haron about it today. Refuah shlema for Rabbani Chana Farchi Chana Batzim Afeg and Rabbi Eli Abadi Elashman Eliyahu Shimon Bazaf Fortuné. The week of Cobra was sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to good today and every day. Let us begin. My friends, we're learning all about the building of the Mishkan. And for those of you who were here on Shabbat, we had a very powerful class called Highs and Lows. And it was unfortunate that I was hoping that we would have the whole Low family so I could say the highs and the lows, but I missed my gag this Shabbat afternoon as it was pouring, freezing cold rain, so I wasn't able to do the, do my thing like that. But however, the highs and lows centered around one concept, and it was about the idea that in Judaism, oftentimes our definition of what is a high in our life actually turns out to just be a setup for something which is going to go low. And in fact, what was Borei Olam doing? He was allowing us to have a high moment so that when it got taken away, we would then be back at a normal level. And still it would be considered for us to be as if we had a full kapara. They tell a story about a fellow who won a lottery ticket, and he was so excited, and he was going crazy, and he was over the moon, and he gets to the place, and his family, they're very poor, they're having a meager celebration. He gets to the lottery office, and it turns out that the number was off by 1, and he didn't win anything. And he came back, and the family's so upset, and he has a big smile on his face. And they ask him what he's smiling about, and the fellow says to his family, he says, "You don't understand." He said, Borei Olam, when it comes time for someone to have kapara, they've done something wrong, they need to suffer, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu could take away something material, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could take away something physical, God could take away health, etc., etc. He says, but clearly for our family, something was supposed to happen very negatively, and we would have had to pay a very high price. But we didn't have the millions of dollars to be able to lose for kapara. So what did God do? He made me think for a day, for a few hours, that we'd won hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I went to the lottery office, and it turns out that I'd lost hundreds of millions of dollars. I got the kapara without losing anything. So sometimes a person experiences highs in their life, which was only a setup for a low, but for the betterment of that person. And vice versa, they experience lows in their life that are actually setups for great highs, like the lows have been in our community. They have been a setup for many high things, for minyanim, for washing, for learning, for donating, for bringing families and simachot into this community. We're very, very grateful to be able to have them. So my friends, this idea of highs and lows, which you talked about on Shabbat, in a physical sense, is also true, my friends, in a spiritual sense. The Rabbeinu Tam writes about this in his Sefer Musar, and he talks about this concept of Yirida Litzorech Aliyah, which means a descent for the sake of a rise. Now, in the Ma'amar Chazal, in the teachings of our rabbis, we read about this when it comes to the lion. The lion, it tells us, is the strongest of all animals. He represents tremendous givurah. But say Chazal, that if you see a lion crouch, he's going low, what is a lion about to do? He's leaning back. He's going down in his haunches in order to be able to pounce, to jump forward. So what seems like an element of crouching is actually a preparation for something tremendous. So I want to talk about this idea like Rabbeinu Tam does, in the sense of a spiritual element. My friends, our great Chachamim were able to make very most beautiful things out of very difficult and often compromising situations. There's an unbelievable example of this with Rav Ezriel Hildesheimer. He was a tremendous Gaon, he was a tremendous tzaddik, but he had an unbelievable level of power and influence with the leaders of his day. Anyway, what happened? They reached out to him to tell him that there was a terrible gezerah, a terrible challenge that was being presented to the people of a certain area. So they asked him if he could intercede on their behalf. Rav Hildesheimer found out how terrible it was. He ascertained that it was pikuach nefesh, that if he didn't go, then the results could be a terrible pogrom. He needed to go and get there even on Shabbat. He goes and he travels to this great leader, to the house of this great nobleman, and he goes and he walks in to visit his friend, and he says, "How can I help you? Come sit down." He sits him down, and he turns to him and he says, "Here, Rabbi," and he opens up his beautiful gold case, and he says, "Have a cigarette." Rabbi Hildesheimer was a big smoker. Back in the day, they actually believed not only that smoking wasn't bad for you, but it was common knowledge, quote unquote, that smoking was very healthy for a person. They believed that it helped a person with their digestion. Everybody smoked. In fact, if you look back at the time, at the movies of the time, the men are smoking, the women are smoking, right? Everybody's smoking. And it wasn't a low thing, it was high society. Exactly what you smoked was the question. Did you smoke with a stick and then the cigarette? Did you smoke with just a cigarette? Did you smoke menthol? Did you smoke thin? Did you smoke? But everybody smoked. Rav Hildesheimer at the time was like anyone else, smoked all the time. He goes to this man, the man reaches out with a cigarette to him, and the rabbi realizes it's Shabbat. Now to travel here, he had to do pikuach nefesh. A person always, when it comes to saving a life, even on a question of saving a life, will break Shabbat. Okay? So here, he had to travel, but to smoke a cigarette is not relevant. The only thing he wasn't sure about was whether or not the man would get agitated, be upset, be insulted, in which case it might be a problem. So the rabbi, on the one hand, he's not allowed to break Shabbat by taking the cigarette. On the other hand, it may be pikuach nefesh, so maybe he should do it. The rabbi figured out a way to be able to honor Shabbat and also to be able to not offend. He said, don't you know that I don't smoke anymore? I've quit smoking. I don't smoke. The guy said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize." Oh, Hazaku Baruch. I don't know what he told him. Gave him Misha Berach, right? And he has the meeting. And again, I don't know the end of the story on that side, but I know the end about what happened to the Gezerah. But I know the end of the story of Rav Hildesheimer. From that day until the day he died, he never put a cigarette to his lips again, because the words came out of his mouth, "I no longer smoke." And even though those words were only in order to be able to save Shabbat, and even though the words came out of his mouth only in order to save the lives of a Jewish community, if I say words, they come out of my mouth under any circumstances, I'm a person of emet. What comes out of my mouth needs to be guarded. So my friends, here's a negative situation. A case where Chilul Shabbat had to be involved. A case where he needed to be able to say something that, was, it seemed at the time to be untrue. But Rav Hildesheimer figured out a way to make the statement true. He actually ensured, by never smoking again, that he had told the truth, that he had not broken his word. There are times, my friends, when less than ideal spiritual situations offer us an opportunity to be able to create something beautiful with what's left. I want to give you one more example of this concept. Something that really it struck me in its purity and in its beauty. Also revolving around the concept of Shabbat, because Shabbat is being introduced over here. The Torah tells us, as we mentioned yesterday, that in the building of the temple, there was an obligation to be able to make sure that none of the acts of building the temple broke Shabbat. And I thought to myself that actually there's a tremendous lesson in here, even with regards to the specific commandment. A lot of times, a person is willing to give themselves excuses about why they're doing something. They're doing something wrong. Oh, you know what, I did this? I did this because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. You know why I did this? That's why I ate it. That's why I went there. That's why I said that. That's why I looked this way. That's why I dressed this way. That's why I let myself, again, I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm talking about on your own internal moral compass. When you believe something, when you're holding somewhere, and then you let down your own self, your own measurement of what's right and what's wrong, and you give yourself excuses, right? In those situations, what are we learning over here? The building of the Beit HaMikdash is amazing. It's so special. It's so fantastic. It brings us so much benefit. It brings us so close to God. And yet, that's not the halakha. And if it's not the halakha, it's not the halakha. So many times I find people telling me, Rabbi, that my spiritual journey, what is your spiritual journey when it's not in accordance with Torah law? Now, no one is judging if a person is not ready for something. The process of growth is one that takes a long time. Everybody needs to grow in tiny, slow increments. But when people will commandeer Judaism and tell God what closeness to Him means for them, just understand how crazy that is. I always say, that's like a guy buying his wife for her birthday tickets to the football game. That's where you want to go. That's what you want to do. In fact, not only do you get brownie points for buying a gift for your wife, you get, I don't even know what the opposite of brownie points are. Does anyone have any idea? Probably like alfalfa sprout points, okay? Some other kind of points, negative points. Because not only did you not buy her what she wants, it's in contradistinction to taking care of the relationship. When a person says, oh, for me, this is my spirituality. What is spirituality when it is disconnected from God? So it might be that you're not ready for something, but let's be honest enough to be able to call it what it is. Let's be honest enough to be able to say, just to make sure that no one took that the wrong way. I was not pointing at someone to say that he does not call something what it is. I was pointing to someone who had corrected me on a euphemism, which might be considered to be insensitive. So I was making sure that he knew that I had paid attention to him and I had taken his words to heart. I don't want anyone to judge someone unfavorably because of something that I might have said. So to be clear and to be precise, a person says, I remember someone once said, Rabbi, so on Yom Kippur, I feel that I connect more to Hashem by taking a walk in the park than by going to shul. So Rabbi, I had the best Yom Kippur ever. I walked 13 miles. I don't know what to say to that. You might have had a very nice experience for you. That's not what Yom Kippur is. And if you walked away from the houses, you might have left the tchum as well. Do you understand? It's so important when we're doing this to be precise. Because if you're not following the laws of the relationship, then you're not bettering the relationship. And that's okay. But let's just say that, let's be honest enough to be able to call that what it is. I'm not yet ready. The idea that we could call something that's taking us further from God, something which is a spiritual closeness to God, because we happen to enjoy doing it, I'm not sure that that's a thing. Someone once asked me, I really feel connected to God when I do yoga. I said, she said, is that spirituality? I said, that depends on you. She said, what do you mean? I said, how good at yoga are you? So I'm very good at yoga. I learned from the top person in the world, who was my trainer. I don't know the exact name. Is it Yogi? Is that the thing? Yeah? Is that the name? Okay. I learned from the best yogi in the world, and I know how to do it exactly authentic. I do it the right way, as it was meant to be done. And the yogi taught me, and I know the breathing techniques, and I know all the stretching techniques. This is not like some self-help yoga from, some new age person who drinks chai tea. This is legit. I do it the right way with the breathing and all of the incantations. I was like, and the what? She says, I do all the sayings in Sanskrit or something like that. She tells me the things. I said, oh, do you know what those means? And she starts telling me what the Sanskrit? Yes. What the Sanskrit sayings mean in English. And I said to her, do you realize that you showed me that you said this saying while you're bowing in one of these things? It's literally a prayer to a foreign god. She's asking me if it's spirituality. And what is it? It's the opposite of spirituality. Now again, not for the sake of judging, just for the sake of letting somebody know. I said, but if you channeled your yoga in the right way, maybe not those sayings, but imagine someone is like, they do the thing, and then they're, I don't really know the poses, I'm not really sure. I know downward dog. I know warrior. Okay, that's is that one warrior, right? Either way, it's either warrior or Hitler. I'm not sure. Either way, right? So the guy sits there and he's doing this thing. But imagine every time he did a pose, he found a ma'amar chazal to be able to say. It'd be very nice. I think we could choose, and then we could, instead of yoga, it could be called yogya, like the yoga of Hashem, right? We could call it yogya. I mean, it's trademark, by the way. If anyone takes that idea, I want 10%. All right? So, that's something. You could turn it into something spiritual. Fantastic. I love that. And all of a sudden you start seeing some guy doing modim in the shul, and he's like, and he's bringing it into the shul. It's fantastic, right? Azaku Baruch. You want to do it that way? That's great. It's in the confines. It's in the blueprint of Yahadut. Let me give you an example of this idea of being able to do something in the confines of Yahadut, to take a less than ideal situation and make it beautiful and make it spiritual, according to not my rules, but God's rules. There was a fellow whose name, I should not call him a fellow, he was not a fellow. He's, what's it called? Do you ever notice that as soon as someone starts running for president, all of a sudden they call everyone folks? Ever notice that? You look at this person like you have never said the word folks in your life. Right? But all of a sudden, folks, no. Don't pretend like you're my friend. This is not my friend. This is a big tzaddik. I should never call him a fellow. There was a great tzaddik. His name was Vayakhel HaLevi. He came from a city called Ostrovtsa. Anyway, he was responsible for all of the Jewish happenings in the town. At the time, one of the greatest challenges for Judaism in Europe was the Haskalah, was the reform movement sweeping the countries, like lightning. And a lot of the young people who did not know fundamentals about Judaism were swayed. They were great scholars in Talmud, but they did not know well the foundations of faith. They did not know well how to answer those maskilim when they were challenging them. And many, many, many people and families fell away from Judaism through this challenge of Haskalah. Anyway, they were very careful about what they allowed in their town because they knew that the minute this had a foothold, it was going to be a problem. Anyway, this Jew came from a faraway place. He was a reform fellow, and he decided he wants to do a play for the Jewish community. And he rents a little theater, and they begged him, and the rabbi begged him and begged him. But of course, what day of the week did he choose to put his play on? On Shabbat. The rabbi begged, he pleaded, he tried to convince, he did everything he could to be able to try and make it work. But nothing he did worked. Shabbat morning, Rev Vayakhel, he wakes up bright and early, prays at home or he prays in the minyan or whatever, and then comes time for the show. The rabbi makes his way to the show, walks into the theater, sits in the front row. Of course, all the people of the town who kind of were curious, had bought tickets, walked in, they see the rabbi sitting there in the room. They know that this show is going to leave Broadway, but their rabbi ain't leaving. Now they have to face him every week. Everyone that walked in, walked out. Not one person went to the show on Shabbat other than Reb Vayakhel himself, the rabbi. I always say it's ironic. The rabbi always tells everyone else, don't work on Shabbat. And then he works on Shabbat. Anyway, the rabbi, right, goes to the thing, he sits in the room. Shabbat is over. And he finds this Jew who'd come to town to make this play. And he hands him from his own pocket the price of every single seat in the theater. And he said, I was not allowed to have a show in our town on Shabbat. I couldn't allow it. I asked, but I also have no right for my religious beliefs to impinge on your financial benefit whatsoever. And he made him whole on every seat in the house. This guy, who initially, I'm sure, he was fuming at the rabbi, now wound up with the seats that people paid for, plus the seats that the rabbi had recompensed him for. Friends, it's a less than ideal situation. But what a way to be able to honor Shabbat, but also to show such sensitivity to someone. To be able to have that person walk away with feelings of a Kiddush Hashem in its heart and not of Chilul Hashem. These are the challenges that we face. In a marriage, when you're raising children, you don't always get to choose how things will play out. And quite often, they're less than ideal. And you've lost your temper. Or you said something that you really didn't mean. What do most of us do? Most of us will give some sort of meager apology. I'm sorry I lost my cool. But you can't just right? You ever see that? You know what I always say? When someone is getting an apology from you and you say, I'm sorry, but? You know what everything that follows the but is? When you go on a website and they've not finished populating the website, and under the picture it says Lauren Ipsum, whatever, all that script in Latin. You ever notice that? Yeah. That is your speech post but. They're not listening. The minute your speech your sorry took a turn to explain why you're actually not sorry, they understand that you're sorry, not sorry. So you're in a less than ideal situation. You screamed at someone publicly. And then what did you do? You apologized in half a second, quietly to them, privately, and then tried to explain why you shouldn't be sorry. Everybody at some point loses their temper. We're human beings. I get it. Everybody at some point says something not so nice to their kids, to their husband, to their wife, to their friends, to their parents. I get it. It happens. The measure of a man or a woman is not whether or not they're perfect. The pasuk says, "En tzaddik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov v'lo yechta." There are no tzaddikim. There's nobody that's perfect. The measure of a person is not in getting things right. The measure of a person is in making things right. What have you achieved now that you're in this situation? How can you salvage this? What does spirituality look like from in this place, from in this hole? Now that we are here, now what? I often think to myself, exactly the modality that we're reading about in Parashat Vayakhel. You have a situation where the Torah tells you that Shabbat precludes you from building the Mishkan. You know what it reminds me of? Rosh Hashanah on Shabbat. You have a situation where Shabbat precludes you from blowing shofar. So what do? What do we do on the day that we don't have shofar because it's Shabbat? What do? Anyone know?
Add another day.
Huh?
Add another day.
Add another day. Well, we're not adding another day for Shabbat though. We talk about Zecher L'Truah. Zecher Truah means today is not a day of shofar blowing. Today is a day where we remember shofar blowing. And we take the opportunity on Shabbat to speak about the shofar, to bring its lessons in our life if we don't have its voice. On a day that you can't build the temple on Shabbat, what do? You bring the temple's memory and its lessons into your life, even if you could not have the temple itself. But it's fascinating. What does the Torah tell us? When we read about and learn about the Mishkan on Shabbat, when we read about, learn about, talk about the shofar on Shabbat, Ma'aleh alav hakatuv ki'ilu asa'o. The Torah makes it as if you did that thing. I love this idea applied to our scenario. You missed the first chance at this. Now you only have the memory of that chance. You only have the ability to learn the lessons of that chance. Talk about, learn about what that means. Talk about not losing your temper. Strategize with this person. How can I make sure that this doesn't happen again? And the talk of not losing your temper and the lessons that you're learning and you're drawing from it. Our rabbis tell us, make it as if you hadn't lost your temper in the first place. Is there a better way after saying something nasty to someone to come back to them and say, I'm sorry, I've said that? No but. I'd like to work with you to make sure that that never happens again. In Shamayim, they take a big pen and they look at your anger and they cross it out. Ma'aleh alav hakatuv ki'ilu asa'o. We can make things right, even if we did not always get them right. Hashem should bless us, be'ezrat Hashem, to be able to turn our challenges into advantages, into opportunities, to be able to turn our lows into our highs. And be'ezrat Hashem, through this process, we will be able to truly build a house for HaKadosh Baruch Hu on His terms, not only on ours. And we're able to do it every single day of the week, including Shabbat. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.